Hi everyone, my name is Esther and I'm studying molecular science and software engineering at UC Berkeley. As a part of my master's program this week, I had the opportunity to attend a leadership bootcamp. I'm making this video to tie together concepts I learned and share ideas that I found valuable. I also want to point out frameworks that I did not find as helpful, while also considering how I could apply those in my career. My academic background is in industrial engineering, and currently it's molecular sciences and software engineering. And I also have worked in the healthcare IT space. My goal is to create and integrate new technology with software products that serve the community in healthcare or drug discovery. And I would also like to mentor employees and lead teams later in my career. I found that the leadership and management topics have insights that I can put into practice when I have that opportunity. So I'm going to go through the topics that we're going to cover today. And as I mentioned, it's leadership and management topics, as well as accounting and engineering topics. And in the accounting and engineering topics, I found it useful for evaluating the health of a business and also evaluating business ventures for future investment. I found that this would be useful when making personal finance decisions with investments, as well as justifying project ideas for funding from management when leading teams. So the funding for project ideas goes into the engineering economics topic. Those are the first four. And then the next ones are marketing, which the marketing topic made me appreciate all of the business teams that marketing interacts with in order to get the big picture of the competitors and customers when trying to evaluate market demand and where to play, which we'll talk about later. And then the next one is communication, which communication had topics that we could put into practice immediately, which was like examples are the power of storytelling and also putting the audience first. And then the next topics that we talked about were strategy and execution. So strategy uh, was extremely helpful in understanding the market, identifying where there's competitive advantage, and knowing how to compete. And this also gave me frameworks to think about how my future organization can develop a strategy, align the organization, and then plan operations, and then execute on those goals, and then adapt. It showed me the importance of continually improving or pivoting to keep competitive advantage. And it's about executing on the strategy. And then the next topic, performance management, showed me the importance of both efficiency and effectiveness to make the best use of resources to achieve the right goals. So it also emphasized the importance of measuring strategy and vision from different performance perspectives. So that was performance management. So it's measuring how the organization is delivering on the goals that it set. And then we also had the opportunity to talk to two guest speakers about startup advising and funding. And it was really fun to get to learn from them. And we got a lot of insights that were very helpful. So these are the topics we're going to be talking about. We're going to start by going over the purpose of leadership, which is to build trust and also drive results. One way that we can build trust is to create a nurturing and learning culture. So create a learning culture. So the components of this is that they tolerate failure. They also reward doers, or people who execute on their deliverables. And another way to instill create a learning culture is through sensitive leadership. So sensitive leadership, it views the leader as a coach. So the leader is able to help others help themselves while emphasizing learning. And this also allows the team members to have ownership, accountability, self-confidence, and responsibility. Three ways that we drive results are through being a change maker, discipline and execution, and then also setting a direction based on the competition and market. So our three ones are change maker, um, discipline in executing on the goals, and then also setting direction based on the market and competition. So yeah, the components of being a change maker is adapting to a changing environment in order to survive and compete with the others, and then also going along with that, knowing the competition and the market, and that can help find a place where value can be added for the highest return on the investment, and that we'll talk more about in the strategy and execution sections. And then another component of this is insisting on realism, which you don't want to be overly optimistic just to increase buy-in or support for your idea. You want to be realistic. The components of discipline and execution is creating the strategy, forming goals, and then executing on those goals consistently. And then setting the direction comes from developing a vision for the future and then implementing a strategy so that you can accomplish that vision. So now, one thing that goes to both builds trust and drives results is aligning and inspiring people. So you want to align and motivate the people in order to be successful. And that comes from communicating a new direction clearly and also creating a smaller group who understands that vision and is committed to achieving it. So some key traits of effective leadership that tie into this framework. So one of the key traits is integrity and honesty, which is crucial in building trust and being successful. So integrity and honesty. And that ensures the longevity of a company, and it creates a solid foundation for the customer relationships, and also it ensures the transparency when you're communicating with your employees and aligning them towards a goal. So you want to be completely honest in that. And then knowledge and expertise, that really helps being a change maker in the field. So expertise. So a technical background is helpful to develop innovative products and then also know when it's time to pivot given feedback and changes in the market. And then the self-confidence, the next part is like next qualities are something that's going to help with this aligning and inspiring people. So we have self-confidence and making sure not to be arrogant, but being realistic, and then also still being able to lead others towards a goal. And then high energy. And it's important to note that different personalities can be very effective leaders. It's about believing in a mission and communicating it in a way that aligns others towards that goal to execute the strategies successfully, which it's very true. And the next one is maturity, and so that also helps to align people. Knowing your weaknesses is really important, and also being self-aware enough to admit that, and then also willing to learn and listen to your team members. Going along with that, exposing vulnerability is also very helpful because it helps you find people who complement your skill set and are good at things that you're not good at. So and it also encourages team members to be more candid and be truthful when talking to you. So we watched a TED Talk about given by 4-star General Stanley McChrystal, and he talked about how to find consensus and shared purpose among people with many ages and different skill sets. And a lot of the things that he said really resonated with me and made me think. So he said that leaders let you fail, but not let you be a failure, and that goes along with into creating a learning culture. He said to be transparent, willing to listen, and willing to be reverse mentored, which goes along with maturity or knowing your weaknesses. And he also said to watch and take care of each other as relationships hold everything together. And when you're a leader, the people you've counted on will help you up. And if you're a leader, the people who count on you need you on your feet. So all of these things showed me the importance of working together and depending on one another to build trust. And it's not just about the team building activities, but it's also about working together and creating that trust. So now we're going to go into frameworks for emotional intelligence and leadership styles, which for me, these are some topics that seemed a little bit too academic to be useful for me at first. And however, they may be useful to reflect on what style of leadership I use in different situations and whether that was the most effective choice for the given situation. So since both leadership is in communication, they're fields that of continuous improvement, and it's hard to know exactly what you need to work on or um, what to do to be successful. So these give more concrete metrics into what makes up each skill set. So these are images from the Leadership That Gets Results by Daniel Goleman, published in Harvard Business Review. Um, Emotional intelligence is split into these four competencies, and you can look at the breakdown to identify your strengths and weaknesses. So personally, I would need to work most on organizational awareness, influence, communication, and conflict management. So those are the ones that I identified for me to work on. Um, and then within the leadership styles, leaders who've mastered four or more of these, especially the authoritative, democratic, affiliative, and coaching, they tend to have the best performance. So they can switch between the different leadership styles given the situation and the needs of their business. So you can go through those leadership styles, and it's good to be able to know them and switch between them well. So that is it for the leadership section, and next we'll start on the management section. Along with effective leadership, we need effective management to drive results. So, a management is the use of knowledge, skills, and available resources to achieve the desired results. A lot of types of management are out there, but most management responsibilities can be split into four categories. These are planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. So, the planning, we want to consider what, when, who, and how. The what drives the missions and the objectives of the organization, when can describe the time to market or when the product is going to go on the market, and then who is resource allocation, and how is the strategy or operational plans. And the organizing capabilities are involve establishing a task and authority relationships that allow the people to work together. So it can be a line of authority or specific people who need to specialize. There's different teams that need to specialize, and what the best use of resources would be. And then leading is what we talked about earlier with how to motivate people to work together. And then controlling is establishing ways to measure and evaluate how an organization is achieving its goals and whether it's achieved its goals. So we'll talk more about that in the performance management section. So building first on the planning responsibility, we have to set goals and targets. So that is a main function at this step. And then we also need to measure performance through clear metrics and unambiguous metrics. And we need to raise the bar to maintain the competitive advantage. So to be at our competitors' level. Um, and then the ways that we can set this goal and targets, one framework is by management by objective, or MBO. And this framework allows management and employees to define organizational goals together, and that increases employee buy-in. There are steps to that, but we won't be going into MBO further than that. And SMART goals are also a component of this step. So SMART goals are the specific, measurable, achievable, and in this case, also agreed upon by stakeholders and also time bound. So we want to make sure that our goals are all of those things. So then building on the leading responsibilities. We did a reading called "What Great Managers Do" by Marcus Buckingham, and that was also published in the Harvard Business Review. And it had many insights on qualities of effective managers. And the first one was discover what is unique about each person and capitalize on it. So discover unique strengths. And what I found really helpful about this article, or the different questions that managers should ask their team members. So this includes what was the best day at work that you've had in the past 3 months? What was the worst day that you've had? And what activates those strengths? So is it the you're more productive in certain times of day, or do you want to be more independent? Do you want more feedback? Are you fueled by recognition? So all of these things are important to understand about your team members. Another thing that's important is understanding their leadership or their learning style. So you want to understand their learning style, and you want to see whether are they an analyzer, a doer, or a watcher. So analyzers, they thrive with practicing scenarios in a classroom environment. Doers are more trial and error. They want the specific task and what the outcomes are. And then the watcher wants to look at demos. They value looking at the complete picture. So all these things are really helpful to help your team members thrive. And one thing, going back to the controls, these are the metrics, and we'll talk about this in the performance management section. Okay, so one thing I want to emphasize is that management and leadership are not two separate jobs, but they are two skill sets that are useful in all jobs. So if we have here management and leadership, it's important to look at this as a continuum. So it can also be seen as management errs more towards the mind. It's a bit more technical, and then leadership is about, or it's more about operate, like making strategies into targets and then meeting those targets. And then the leadership is more about setting direction. So it can be looked at as that separation there. So leading involves having that vision, as we talked about. It requires motivation and passion, taking risk, and setting direction and pace. And managing is more seeing how can we execute on the strategies and goals of the company. And that's about setting specific goals and targets, and having metrics, and also managing risk. So it's really helpful to see it as two different skill sets, and we can use things from each of these skill sets. It's not like two separate jobs. And this, the first image here, emphasizes that as well. It sees how leadership and management are both connected in order to inspire and organize a team. And we see that if you have both strong leadership and strong management, you have a well-organized, well-motivated team. If you don't have management, then it's not well-organized. It's not administratively sound. And when you don't have leadership, then the motivation isn't there, and there's no clear direction. And another thing I want to talk about is a lot like the management. There are a lot of management frameworks, and some of them, similar to the leadership styles, they were difficult for me to connect with in practice. We can look at one of those examples here called managerial sources of power. So in this, there are 5 different sources of power, and I feel that this doesn't factor in the trust built within the team or the learning or any other nuance like that. So I thought it lacked a little bit of nuance and context. So we will go into the accounting section. Now we're going to talk about accounting to evaluate financial health. So accounting studies the past by analyzing, summarizing, and reporting on financial indicators and economic trends. So the idea in this section that helped me the most was how to evaluate a company's financial health through 3 financial statements. We have the income statement, the balance sheet, and we have the cash flow statement. So the income statement is a summary of a company's cumulative business results over a given accounting period, and it's an indication of the size and profitability of a company. Now, the balance sheet is a summary of the company's financial position at a given point in time, and it indicates the solvency of a business. So solvency is the ability of a company to meet long-term debts. And next, the cash flow statement gives a summary of how the company was acquired and of how a company acquired and spent its cash during a given span of time. And it's an indicator of liquidity. So liquidity is how easily an asset can be converted to cash. Each of these statements has a corresponding equation that it is based on. So the income statement has revenues is equal to revenues minus expenses is equal to net income. And then the balance sheet, the equation is assets equals liabilities plus equity. And the cash flow statement is cash flow equals the sources of funds minus uses of funds. And then, so with these three, we can find the profitability, solvency, and liquidity of a business and have a good idea of its financial health. We can tie a lot of these concepts together with the following image. We see that we have different functions that are related to each other. So we have the accounting function, and we have the managerial function, and the engineering economy function. So all of these functions share data and communication with each other. And we can really see how each of these focus on different aspects of the business. So this is focusing on the past, where managerial is focusing on past and future. And then engineering economy is focused on the future. We see that the additional functions of these areas are in the accounting is reporting on the financial indicators and trends, economic trends. Managerial function is focused on budgeting, capital budgeting, and decision making, and also risk analysis. And then engineering economy is focused on the feasibility of different alternatives and project evaluation, as well as considering trade-offs and constraints when evaluating those alternatives and projects. So now we'll briefly look into budgeting, which is a key function of accounting. So budgeting is it involves planning, directing, and controlling. So the planning is in deciding the goal setting and also the size of the business. Directing is talking about making decisions and actions to achieve the company's budget goals. And then controlling is about comparing actual performance against the budgeted goals. And then also adjusting activities to achieve the budgeted goals. And they use these three statements in order to do the budgeting functions that we talked about. So now we're going to be talking about engineering economics or engineering economy, and that'll be the next section. Now we'll talk about engineering economics to evaluate alternatives for decision making. Engineering economics is all about evaluating the worth of systems, products, and services in relation to their costs. So, where accounting evaluated past performance, engineering economy evaluates and predicts future events. This is useful for personal finance decisions when investing or to justify project ideas to secure funding from management. The engineering economics system involves systematic evaluation of economic merits of proposed solutions to engineering problems. So this involves identifying all of these alternatives and then creating a consistent way to compare all of them and decide which alternative to choose. So we're going to go through a couple principles of engineering economics that we can use as a framework for decision making. So the first one is to identify and develop alternatives. So that's all of our potential solutions or projects. Um, and the second step or principle is to focus on the difference. So when we make a decision we make the decision based on the differences in expected future outcomes among all the alternatives. The next principle is to use a consistent viewpoint. So this is by evaluating the prospective outcomes based on a consistent and defined viewpoint or using the same metric to compare all of the possible solutions. The next one is to consider all relevant criteria. And then next, going along with this one is like the common unit of measure that goes along with the consistent viewpoint. All right. And then making uncertainty explicit. So you want to understand exactly where your projections are making assumptions. So you state your assumptions. And then next, our final one is whether is to revisit the decisions. So reevaluate. So now those are the principles of engineering economics. And another idea I found useful was the cash flow diagram, equivalence, and assessing return on investment. So those are all concepts I think are very important to understand, but I don't have much experience with it. So that's something that I want to work on developing that skill. So creating the net present value analysis is a skill that I want to develop. So, okay, so now we will go into the marketing section. All right, so now we're going to talk about marketing. The guiding focus of marketing is to identify where to play so that we have the right to win. So here it's where to play so that we have the right to win. So where to play comes down to where are we going to be in the market. So first, this comes down to market segmentation, and we can compete on two different things. So the first is differentiation, which is the willingness to pay for an innovative product or differentiate ourselves from what's available. And the second thing we can compete on is cost. So here, the lowest price will win. And then where there's a right to win, we would be looking at the competitive landscape. So the competitive landscape involves understanding, are we working in a monopoly, an oligopoly, or perfect competition? Monopoly is where there's one main product that's on the market, one business who has all of the uh, consumer demand. And then oligopoly is when there's a few big businesses, and then perfect competition is when there's many businesses competing with each other. And so then uh, this is the main guiding purpose of marketing, and it's very key in what the success of a business. And one thing that really surprised me and I found very interesting was that marketing works with most facets of the business, both internally and also with external organizations. So they work with many stakeholders. And some uh, examples of this is that they develop market strategies for management. They identify delivery demands for operation. They provide pricing strategies to finance. They also work with R&D and engineering to show the market opportunities that are out there. They learn about the competitors and the competitive landscape. They also have to work with the government to comply with government regulations. And then they also build very long-term lasting relationships with customers. They're very key in doing that. So I love seeing all of these stakeholders that marketing works with, and I especially appreciate that they communicate technically with engineering and R&D for product development, and they also work with customers to ensure their success and build long-lasting relationships. And so this encouraged me to investigate marketing positions as a career. And so now we're going to be talking about communication. All right, now we're going to talk about communication to share your message. There are three things you want to think about while you are creating a presentation. So the first thing you want to think about is defining your goals. The second thing you want to think about is knowing your audience. The third thing is to consider the context. So for goals, you can think about what do you want the audience to do? What do you want them to take away from the presentation? For the second point, what does your audience already know about the topic? The third point is context, and it's considering whether is a situation formal or what is the audience size. In the Best Public Speakers Put Audience First article by Deborah Regal, she encourages the speaker to have self awareness, empathy, and foresight. So, self awareness, empathy, and foresight. And this helps the presenter really understand what should the goals be and how this should be communicated to the audience. She really poses these questions, which were very helpful to me. She makes us think about what makes the audience get out of bed and what keeps them up at night. And that allows us to understand what motivates, inspires, and worries the audience so that they can speak to their concerns and goals. And so then we also want to think about what would they want me to understand about their situation or their reality right now. So all of that helps us make an effective speech or presentation. Another thing we want to think about while speaking is the seven C's. So the seven C's are clear, concise, concrete, correct, coherent, complete, and courteous. So all of these principles should inform how we communicate. And the final thing I want to talk about that was very helpful was the power of storytelling. In the TED Talk by Karen Eber called How Brains Respond to Stories, she makes a really good point about how to keep the audience attention. And she shares this by she encourages us to share unexpected information little by little. And that helps the audience be engaged in the story. The second point is when we're structuring the story is to think about three things, which are context, conflict, and outcome. So it should follow that general structure. And another point is that storytelling gives the audience empathy for the storyteller, and it also increases their oxytocin that's released, and that helps people trust the storyteller more, which makes our presentation more effective. And finally, she makes the point that data does not change behavior, but emotions do. So emotions change behavior. So that is very effective when we want to have the audience take an action in order to meet the goal of our presentation. So these are all the things that I found really helpful in the communication section, and I will definitely be thinking about them when I give presentations in the future. Thank you. So now we're going to shift gears into strategy. All right, now we're going to talk about strategy to create a plan. So strategy is all about creating an overall plan for deploying resources to establish a favorable position. So that is a plan versus a tactic is different. So a tactic is a scheme for a specific maneuver, and that is more aligned with execution, which is going to be our next topic. So one way that we can formulate a strategy is through Ken Andrews' model of strategy formulation process. So we're going to be talking about strategy formulation. So what are things that we should be thinking about when we do that? The first one is organizational competencies. So that is answering the question, what can we do? The second point is the value of key implementers. So what do the key implementers think we should do? What do we want to develop? So those 2 points help us answer what is our organization committed to developing and learning to care about. And then the third point is industry threats and opportunities. So this point makes us think about what might we do. And then our fourth is societal responsibilities. So societal responsibilities makes us think, what ought we do? And so it's a combination of all four of these things that helps us form a good strategy. And the last 2 points, the third and fourth, help us to think about how can we shape tomorrow's value system to create new possibilities with our stakeholders. The next thing I found very helpful in this section was the value added chain. So the value added chain is a microeconomics term, which it describes the various steps that goods or services go through from the lowest state of the supply chain to final consumption. So we have our raw materials, which is our first step. And then our last step is when we have the product with the customer. And then all of the steps in between, that's what forms the value added chain. And our goal is to identify a sweet spot in the chain, given the competition, so that we have the greatest profit. And this chain is important to determine where to play so that we have the right to win, which is what we talked about in the marketing section. So to understand the existing market, we can use the Porter's five forces um, framework. So Porter's five forces. This allows us to understand the market. So the five forces are the threats of new entrants. So what is the barrier of to entry for the market? Um, if it's low, then there will be a lot of new entrants in the market, new companies. And then the second one is the bargaining power of suppliers. Is it a very rare raw material? Are there other suppliers supplying it? Then the other one is the bargaining power of buyers. So what are their switching costs? And what information do they have? And then also we have the threat of substitutes. So can other can the buyers buy another product? It's like toothpaste has a bunch of substitutes and buyers can switch between them easily. Um, and then the other one is intensity of rivalry among the existing companies. So all those things help us understand the existing market. So this was for external evaluation. So companies outside of ourselves. What we want is also a way to evaluate the internal business within our business. So this is the resource-based view, is a framework we can use to understand how our business is operating. So the idea here is that there are two types of resources. There are both tangible and intangible resources. And then these form the capabilities of the company. What can we create and put on the market? And then this is what creates competitive advantage. And we talked about competitive advantage earlier. So that is a position to earn superior profit in the industry. So competitive advantage creates profit. And the sources of competitive advantage we talked about earlier, they are both we can compete on cost, which is creating a similar product at a lower cost, and then also differentiation, which is there's a price premium for unique products. And we talked about that has to do with market segmentation, which we talked about in marketing. All right, so now we're going to talk about how to execute on this strategy in the next section. All right, now we're going to talk about how to execute on strategy. We talked about competitive advantage in the last section. So we're going to talk about how competitive advantage can emerge. What are the sources of competitive advantage? The first one is external sources, and the second one are internal sources. External sources can be the customer demand, it can be prices in the market, or tech. So when different firms have different levels of access to resources, there are different impacts across firms. Some firms are faster and more effective in exploiting those changes than others. And so that makes them more successful. The internal sources can be a greater ability to be creative and innovative within the company. So firms have to sustain a competitive advantage through continuous product innovation and matching the customer demands for more innovative products with their ability to supply that. Now we can talk about the ingredients for successful implementation of strategy. So the main things here is that we have to have simple long-term goals. That's a big point throughout this. The second one is have a good idea of your external market and also evaluate your internal resources accurately. As we talked about earlier, external market can be analyzed through Porter's five forces, and internal can be evaluated through the resource-based view. That's one way to learn more about both of those things. And now, successful implementation of all three of these things is what allows us to execute strategies effectively. Awesome. All right. Now, another aspect of execution is evaluating an initiative portfolio. So, our initiative portfolio is a group of initiatives that the organization wants to execute. The way that we can evaluate these are by three things. The first is strategic fits and benefit. So you can line up these initiatives with objectives and then determine their impact as well as their benefit. The second is resource demands. Do you have enough people for this? What's the duration of the project? Is the monetary investment needed? And the third is organizational capabilities. And that has to do with the project risk. Are you prepared to take that risk? Are there the budget needs and the staff and skills that are available? So all of these things will help form which projects and initiatives the company takes on. And then the final thought here is the management system. And this combines a lot of the concepts that we learned about. So first, we develop the strategy. Then we plan the strategy. So developing the strategy involves the mission, the values, and then planning the strategy involves the measures and targets, creating the initiative portfolio we just talked about, and funding those projects, and then align the organization, as we talked about in leadership and management sections. So align the organization, and then plan operations, and then we're going to execute on the plan. We're then going to monitor and learn how are we performing against the metrics, and then test and adapt. And then finally, we're going to revisit our strategy, and it's all a cycle like that. So the things at the center of this are the strategic plan, the strategic and operating plan. And this informs both of those steps. So this involves the strategic plan involves the balanced scorecard, and the operating plans involve dashboards, sales forecasts, resource requirements, and budget. And so we'll be looking at more of those concepts in the next performance management section. Now we're going to look at how to use performance management to measure progress. So companies need to be two things. Companies need to be effective, and they also need to be efficient. So companies need to be effective, and that is about setting the right goals. They need to be efficient by allocating the right resources. So let us look at more into the performance management balance scorecard that we mentioned earlier. So this looks at strategy and vision and evaluates them from four performance perspectives. So we're going to be talking about the balance scorecard. So we have strategy and vision at the center. And then the four ways that we can, the four perspectives we can take are financial, which means is there any value for those who fund and buy the product? Second is customers, which do our customers get what they need from the products? The third one is internal process, which asks, are the key processes owned, managed, and improved continuously? And the fourth one is learning and growth. So that means, are we capable, motivated, and supported by effective systems? Are the staff capable? And so one thing we want to really consider is how we can include corporate social responsibility in this scorecard. So we want to evaluate all of the four perspectives from that lens as well. So for financial, are we responsibly investing our financial resources in social and environmental causes? For customers, do we treat our customers fairly? Do they receive instructions for safe use of products? In the internal process, do we manage key processes in ethically, socially, and environmentally responsible manner? And then the learning growth, do we offer learning and growth opportunities to our employees? And are we exploring innovative product development approaches? So we also talked about operational reporting in the management system cycle. So let's quickly go over the five features of best practice reporting. So we have five different steps here. Think about. The first one is context. So how does the organization define success? Second is level. So make sure that we're using metrics to support right decision making and not just meeting the target. The third is the trend. Patterns provide a lot more insights than a lot of figures. So make sure that we're making those patterns clear. The fourth is analysis. So why is the trend moving up and down? And then the fifth is action. What action should we take based on the metrics? And that is all for reporting. I thought all of these frameworks were effective and things that I will think about when measuring my progress towards goals in the future. So now we'll talk about startup advising and funding. We had the opportunity to speak to two guest speakers who discussed startup advising and funding, and I'll share some points that I found were very helpful, and I found both discussions really insightful. So the first discussion we had was with Dr. Peter Faller, and he talked about startup advising. One point that I found helpful was he encouraged us to take that step and find the trade associations or conferences and ask to observe. And he said to select an incubator and apply, and he said to reach out for help. And all of those things were very encouraging in that we just have to take that first step and observe and apply to incubators and develop our ideas. The second point that he emphasized was the first contact with customers are very important, and you need to find what they need. So finding that customer need is really important in developing your product. So this reminded me to be customer focused and find what isn't being offered yet, even though I don't have a specific product idea yet. And then the final point was he encouraged us to know what we don't know, which ties into being self aware and identifying our weaknesses so that we can find others who can help us and really complement our skill set. The second discussion that we had was with Dr. Ted Howe, and he talked about startup funding. I was new to the world of VC firms, and he talked about some of the things that VC firms really value when investing in companies. The four things were time, geography, sector, and stage. So, time means the cadence of the funding, or knowing most of the VC funds have active investment periods in the first 3 to 4 years. So, and 10 years is the typical durations of a VC fund. So, it's hard to secure an investment outside of the active investment period. And then the geography is important because most VCs will invest in local companies so that they can meet with management and visit facilities if it's necessary. The third thing is sector, which most VC funds focus on a specific sector and look for companies within that sector. And then the fourth is the stage. So paying attention to whether it's a Series A, Series B, or Series C round of investing that the VC fund invests in. Series A is a developing product. B is having traction and they have a product. And then C is just starting, or they have a concept of a product. And also another point that stood out to me is that the upper management's responsibility is to mainly secure funding and find the right people. So focusing on those are important. So I found both of these discussions really helpful, and I'm just going to have some closing remarks about the program. One thing that stayed with me was when Dr. Cheng asked us, what do you want to be remembered by? What will be left for future generations? And how will you create value? This encouraged me to think about what I truly want from my career and reminded me of what matters most to me. The idea was also echoed in our conversation with Dr. Rosen from Arcus. He recommended that we not do things because that's what everyone else is doing, but we follow our curiosity and take opportunities along the way that will serve us well for a fulfilled career. He also reminded us not to think of a binary where one mistake dooms us to failure. We will have successes and mistakes along the way, and learning and continuing forward will be what's important. Building relationships with people, as well as creating and integrating software that improves lives, is what I strive for. This class encouraged me to think about all the responsibilities and teams that must work together to make that a reality. I really enjoyed my time here, and I can't wait to apply everything that I've learned. Thank you.